Welcome to the very first Kickstart the Week podcast. I'm your Comic Maven Nicole D'Andria, and I've done hundreds of text interviews with creators of crowdfunding projects, typically for comic books on Kickstarter. I feel very honored that my first guest is a fellow member of Comic Frontline, Brant Fowler. He is the publisher of Last Ember Press, and we are talking about his Kickstarter for the Last Ember Hunted #1, which he not only wrote but also did the letters and the logo for. The book is a coming-of-age superhero story about Ember Madison. Not only does she have to deal with the woes of being a teenager like bullies, but she also has to deal with her emerging fire powers and a serial killer. Full disclosure, I am the editor for this issue of The Last Ember, so I have already read the book, and I'm also one of its Kickstarter backers. Enjoy the interview, and if you like what you hear, support the book on Kickstarter. I'm really happy I'm able to have you on, especially as my first guest, since you're the one who suggested I transition Kickstart the Week into this podcast format. So, of course, that does mean if this totally sucks, I'm 100% blaming you for it.
Of course, yeah. I'm obviously honored to be the first guest, and I'm excited for you to kind of take this turn with it. So it's gonna be fun.
Thank you. But yeah, so your Kickstarter for The Last Ember Hunted #1, I know it's been doing really well. It's really close to hitting its goal of over 4,000.
Right.
And I know you have a lot of really good Kickstarter experience. This is your 9th project on Kickstarter?
Yeah, I believe so. It's a little confusing because a couple of them are on my wife's account. So I think this is actually my 8th on my account. And she's done 2 on hers. So it might be my 10th. I don't, I don't really remember. Yeah.
Well, I think it's safe to say you're pretty much an expert at this point, though.
Wow. I think we can all always learn more, right?
That's very true. Very true. Now, this also, not only is this not your first Kickstarter, but it's also not the first time Ember has made a comic book appearance, despite the #1 in the title of this Kickstarter. Can you kind of give us a bit of background about the character's history?
Sure. Yeah. So this character. It's going to kind of get into another thing that we're going to talk about later, I think. But this character kind of was birthed from the company itself. When I was designing the logo for the company, my wife, my girlfriend at the time, pointed out that it looked like there was a girl in the flame of our symbol, and it was not intended. It was a total accident, but we kind of ran with that, and that's kind of where Ember came from. And I originally was going to call the book just simply Ember, and another book came out before mine did called Ember, so that's where the Last Ember came from, and it kind of played into it, and it kind of fed the mythology behind her and framed the story a little bit. So in 2017, my very first Kickstarter I ever launched was actually for the Last Ember issue 1. We had released issue 0 self-published, and it was just like a 16-page primer. Kind of introduced both Ember and a girl named Ashley, which took place centuries before, that were very similar mirrored stories. And it just kind of showed us Ember getting her powers for the first time, and kind of left it at a cliffhanger with that. So when we went into the issue 1, that was like the full origin story of her. There was some time that passed in between 0 and 1, so she had already had these abilities for a little bit, and she was trying to cope with that and figure out what that meant. And she kind of distanced herself from her friends, and she was dipping her toes back into that world. And in the meantime, there's somebody watching her from the shadows. There's another person that comes in at the end that's hunting and killing people, and there's a girl in school that kind of doesn't like Embers too much, and kind of lets that be known, and it sets us on the course for this series.
Okay, so with Hunted #1, I find it interesting that you decided to keep the #1 going. Is that to show it's easily accessible to new readers?
That's part of it. Really, the main reason was a new creative team came on with this issue, and it just felt right to kind of start fresh. Like, there had been such a gap between the last issue. My last Kickstarter for Ember was kind of a collection of 0 and 1 with new content. So it was kind of the same story, in a different format. But this was a brand new issue, a brand new beginning. And even though it continues off of that previous story, I felt like it was important to separate the two and kind of just, this was a bold new direction with bold new art and a story that I'm excited to tell. So I figured, why not jump with the number one?
No, that makes a lot of sense. Now I'm curious, since you were mentioning that it has new creative team and kind of a new style. Can you talk a bit about the new members of your creative team and how the vibe has changed from previous issues to this one?
Yeah, absolutely. Previously, it was more like a slice of life style, I think. Very down to earth, very, it kind of lent itself to the high school drama kind of stuff. And with this art team of Federico Sabatini is the artist and Andrea Celestini is the colorist. And I've worked with this team in the past, lettering a book that they both worked on a few years ago, and I'd always wanted to work with them since. And they were kind of what I envisioned Ember being from the beginning, and it just didn't work out until now to work with them. And so when they were both available, I jumped on that, and it was perfect because they both love Ember, and they've both had ideas going into it, and it's been a really collaborative effort, which has kind of changed the story because their art has forced me to kind of look outside of where I was going and kind of sophisticate the direction of Ember while it's still like accessible from any age group. I think it's a little bit of a darker story that I'm going down because the art is moodier, I guess. It's definitely more dynamic, a lot more creativity with the panel layouts and a lot of use of blacks and just really expressive faces and that kind of thing. Federico is just brilliant at that kind of thing. So I really wanted to step up my game with the story that I was telling to kind of match the new art style on the book. So with this arc, which is Hunted, Ember is literally being tracked down by a serial killer who is killing beings just like her. So it does take a little bit of a darker twist.
Yeah, I think it's so cool how you can really see how The Last Ember has evolved over time just by looking at like the different Kickstarter campaigns you've done for it.
Right.
Like it's just so interesting to see how the style has changed while it still maintains, some of the same aspects that I think previous backers will still be familiar with. You're really entering a new direction that I think is really interesting.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. And yeah, I agree with you. I think at the core of the story, it's still about a teenage girl who gains these abilities and is trying to figure out what that means for her life and for her family and for her friends. And that journey is still very present. And so if you've enjoyed Ember from the past, you're still going to enjoy this. It's just a different art style and just, a little bit of a darker story, which in comics you can tell different kinds of stories with your characters and still maintain the core of who they are, and I hope that I'm doing that with Ember.
Well, I would say, as someone who has definitely read past issues and has read the script for Hunted in particular, I think you're definitely keeping the core of the character while making the story a lot of fun and still maintaining darker elements that you're adding in.
Thank you again. I really appreciate that. That's the goal. So I'm glad that I'm achieving it. I guess.
Yeah. I like the fact, and I'd like to talk about this for a bit, is that, you have those darker elements, the supernatural stuff going on with Ember's powers, but then you're also grounding it in reality a bit with coming of age superhero story that's also a story about a teenager, coming of age in her own way, dealing with things like bullies and her friends at school that she kind of feels pushed away from with her powers. And I'm kind of curious to hear about how you go about finding a balance between, seeing Ember on the super powered side of things, supernatural side, and then also seeing her on the normal teenage side.
Yeah, it's an interesting balance to strike, and it's something that I don't feel like I did well enough in the previous issue, which I feel like the previous issue was very much centered on her everyday life. There was very little of the powers and the supernatural elements of it. And I think, again, with the art style on this book, that it has kind of pushed me to find that balance a little bit easier. And so now, I mean, I think it's still very important to ground her in, everyday life, because that's an important aspect of the character. I've designed the character with her family in mind and her friends in mind, and that kind of those supporting characters influencing her actions and everything that happens to her. So those elements are definitely important, and I don't want to lose sight of that. But at the same time, you got to inject those, sinister moments and those, actiony moments and that kind of thing to, kind of drive her towards her ultimate destiny. So with this issue, I tried to, like, there's three different sub stories kind of going on here. You've got Ember's story with Tiana, that's her bully that you mentioned, and you've got this serial killer, and then you've got this mystery figure that's watching her from the shadows that is discovering more about her and things that are going on. And that's kind of where the action comes in at first, as they encounter a supernatural being themselves. And then Ember is still dealing with Tiana and that kind of thing. And then as it gets into issue 2, especially, the serial killer is going to get closer, and Ember is actually going to be more empowered in that issue. Here, she's still kind of figuring out where she stands with everything, and kind of finding herself.
Yeah, I'm definitely excited to see the future that you have planned for Ember, especially with the serial killer angle and things like that.
Yeah, it should be exciting. And I'm not sure that I actually answered your question, but I tried.
No, I think that was a very valiant attempt. No, I definitely, I got a lot out of that. And I feel like you have somewhat answered this, but kind of springboarding off of that. I know in comics, there tend to be a lot of, teenage superhero stories. And I think you have touched on this a bit, but I'm curious, when asked directly, like, if you had to say the one thing that you feel The Last Ember has that makes it stand out from other teenage superhero stories that you can find in comics, what you feel that would be.
Yeah, I think part of it's the mythological aspect of it. Like, it's not just typical, science accident or, mutation or that kind of thing. It's and not saying this hasn't been done, but it's kind of wrapping it in mythology, and not just one mythology, but like all mythologies kind of forming together to create this brand new mythology that I hope I do justice to. And it's kind of those crossing between those two worlds of, she's a fire goddess, but she's a teenage girl in high school, and how do you cope with that on a personal level? And I think that's what makes Ember kind of different and stand out.
I do love my mythology. I kind of,
Nice.
yeah, I have to say, going off of that then, because I do love talking myths, is were there any particular myths in particular that you were kind of inspired by when it comes to The Last Ember, or that you kind of pay homage to with the story?
Yeah, absolutely. So years ago, I don't even remember what year it was, but Virgin Comics put out a slate of titles that were retelling like Indian mythology. Sadhu was one of them, Ramayan, titles like that. And those really intrigued me at the time. And I kind of just ate them up. And that whole the Indian mythology, Hindu mythology was really interesting to me. So that's kind of why Ember is half Indian. To kind of pay homage to that and kind of explore it a little bit more myself. But I also, I've always, loved Greek mythology and different mythologies. So I've, and she's also half Irish. So there's going to be some Celtic mythology thrown in there too. It's just,
Wow.
yeah, it's, I'm going all over the place and kind of trying to, build up from that and kind of tie it all together in what I hope is an interesting way.
Yeah, giving everybody a little bit of everything.
Yeah. So hopefully I don't screw it up and everybody hates me.
I think based on, your previous performances, I think you're doing pretty well so far. So I don't think you have to worry about that too much.
That's good.
But yeah, I mean, shifting gears a bit, because I'd never heard about those titles from, you said it was Virgin Comics that they put out, things like that. I'd never heard about those. Those sound really interesting.
Yeah, they really were, and they were interesting art styles that they married with them too. It was not your typical superhero kind of art. It was more, I don't want to say painted look, but they definitely were creative with the art styles that they put with those books, which kind of made them even more interesting.
Well, now I have something to add to my already way too long read list.
I hear that, yeah, for sure.
God, but I guess switching gears a bit before I get lost in that. kind of coming back around to the way that you're approaching the comic through Kickstarter. Something I thought was really cool that I saw on your Kickstarter, which I think is fairly unique. I haven't seen too many other Kickstarters implement this, and maybe you can tell me a bit more about kind of the inspiration behind this and things like that, is you have the unique approach where you kind of have milestone points within your campaign before you even, set your goal. So like in addition to your stretch goals that you have, you kind of have additional rewards that unlock as you get up to your 100% funding goal for your Kickstarter, if I have that right, based on what you have on your Kickstarter. And I just thought that approach was really interesting because I haven't really seen people who do that in addition to stretch goals and things like that. So can you tell us a bit more about that and what's been unlocked so far and other things that people can look forward to?
Yeah, sure. So the first person I saw do that was a friend of mine, Ryan Crowboss, who does a book called Sunmaker, and he actually had them as mystery items that he revealed as you went through the campaign, and I thought it was really cool at the time. That was around the time I did my first campaign, or maybe my second. I don't remember. It's been a while, but I thought it was a cool idea, so I kind of borrowed it. And since then, I've seen several others do some version of it. Tyler James actually did one where you had to be a backer by the time the milestone hit to actually get it, which I thought was that was kind of cool too. That was his most recent campaign for Welling Blade, so that was another. That's something I might try in the future too. But I think it's a cool way to keep people excited and keep the campaign moving, because anybody that's done a Kickstarter or been involved with one knows that in the middle there's usually this dead space, this lull time where not much happens and you don't get a whole lot of backers, and it's like, what do you do? Because as a creator, you're just like, it may not be in the minds of the backers, but in the creator's mind, it's like refreshing constantly. Like, what can I do to get this moving? Because you start freaking out a little bit, so it's something to keep both me and the backers entertained, and something to tweet about, kind of, we're close to hitting this milestone and we're going to unlock this thing, so come check it out. And it's I just like to have fun with it, and sometimes it's really cool things, sometimes it's small things, sometimes it's big things. It just depends on the mood and the finances, and what we really need to, if we really need to like get to a point in the campaign, it's like, okay, what can I unlock now that will get people excited about it? And go ahead.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, it sounds like a really nice way to kind of help you through the dreaded dead zone.
Yeah, exactly. So you also asked what we've unlocked and what's to come. So the first thing we unlocked was a PDF, a volume 1 of Tart by Kevin Joseph, which is actually being published by Scout Comics now. This contains the first 3 issues of the series, I think. So we unlocked that, and I already sent it out to all the backers. And the second one was a print that Mike Watson of Short Fuse Media actually drew of Ember live during a chat and draw episode during my last campaign. And so I was like, I hit him up. I was like, do you mind if I, use this in my campaign? And he was like, sure. So I unlocked that. And so that's going to go to all the backers, either physically or digitally. And then the next one, which we're really close to as we're recording this, is a metal bookmark of a panel from this issue of The Last Ember that features Ember shooting fire. And I saw these on I saw the metalwork on another campaign that had done tarot cards, and I was like, well, how much? I asked the creator how much that cost and everything. He sent me to the site, and I talked to the people, and it was pretty reasonable. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do these metal bookmarks and just give them away. And so that's the next one we're going to unlock, and then we have one more after that when we hit 201 backers, which right now we're about 180. And that is something that I haven't revealed yet, except for in an email that I sent out this morning. So I'm gonna tell it here, which is it's gonna be a 5x9 metal print that we're unlocking as an add-on and a reward tier of our project image, which is this really cool image of Ember with both her hands aflame and these what do you call them? I'm totally lost the term. These flashes around her that I just think on a metal print will look really cool. And we're going to unlock that.
Almost like a super powered version of fireworks. Kind of sounds like.
Yeah, kind of. So, I just, when I saw that they did metal prints and stuff, and I thought about that image, I was like, yeah, that's gonna look cool as a metal print, and it's got like greens and yellows and oranges and stuff in it too, so it's just gonna really shine nicely, I think.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. Thank you for sharing that, because that
Yeah,
sounds like, just another thing to look forward to on the campaign. So.
right. Yeah.
And I mean, at this point, I mean, I think we're kind of winding down, but I'm curious because I think, not to jinx it, but it seems pretty sure that this campaign, since at the time of recording this, you still have 12 days to go, but you're very close to meeting your goal. So I'm kind of curious, after you meet the goal for this Kickstarter, if you can like tell us anything else about the future of both Last Ember and also your publishing company that's publishing at Last Ember Press. If you can tell us anything else about your future plans for the book and future Kickstarters, maybe.
Yeah, for sure. So, as I just totally lost myself there, but
No
I was
problem.
trying to say,
All the time.
my mind was saying three different things at once, and I couldn't figure out which one to spit out. But yeah, so we are really close to our goal, which I'm very fortunate for. This is tracking to be our biggest and best campaign ever to date. So like those two milestones I just mentioned, once we hit those, we will have funded more and had more backers than we've ever had on a single campaign, which is really cool.
Congrats. Really
Thank
awesome.
you. Thank you so much. So with once we reach that, we obviously have some plans for some stretch goals, so we'll look into those and maybe do something with that. But I don't want to get ahead of myself either.
Mm-hmm.
As far as the series goes, The Last Ember Hunted is the current arc, which is 4 issues, as you know. And after that, depending on how well the reception is, I'll either continue the numbering like with the number 5 and just kind of change the arc title, or I'll start a brand new mini series after a short break. Either way, there'll be a little break in between. That's kind of where I see it going, because Ember is an ongoing story that I hope eventually spreads out into a larger universe. That she's just the first character to open up this new Emberverse, as I call it. So I have plans going forward for her, obviously, and we'll see how far we can get, and how much people are enjoying it. And I think with this new art team and just the new direction of it, I have high hopes for it. I'm very excited about it. And as far as Last Ember Press itself, we do have other titles. Celestial Falcon is a title that I co-write. We are currently working on issue 2. We just had some new art come in the other day for that, and so we'll be continuing on with that in 2021 as well. And Secrets of Willamist art pages are coming in for that as well. That's Lisa's book. It has 2 more issues to go after that, so we'll wrap that up. And we have a couple other projects that we're trying to decide which one to go with next after that. But those are the 3 main focuses right now. With Last Ember being the absolute main focus, because it seems to be the book that most people are excited about coming out from us. So, which I'm again very thankful for, that people are very interested in Ember, and I'm all for telling more stories with Ember. So.
Yeah, I really hope that the Emberverse continues to kind of burn brighter over the years, because I can definitely see you extending the reach a lot with the book.
Yeah, I hope so. And there's some ideas that I've had, that expands on that universe, and some of them, a couple of my friends have had that I might bring in, and there's some cool stories there that I hope to be able to tell.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people are really excited to hear them. So
awesome. I hope so.
yeah.
It seems so. Yeah.
No, definitely. Yeah, it definitely has a proven track record. But I would say with that, I do want to end this with probably, I think this is the question I ask on all of the Kickstart the Weeks, at least when they are in print. So I might as well ask it on the podcast as well. But if you had any inspirational words that you wanted to give to comic book creators out there who are interested in, either crowdfunding their project or just writing their project in general.
Yeah, so with crowdfunding specifically, I mean just do it, but build your audience a little bit first. It doesn't matter how big your audience is, just measure what you're launching to the size of audience that you have. I think that's the mistake that I see a lot of creators make, that they don't have a huge audience and go out for a huge goal, or vice versa. They'll have a big audience and they'll fund a very small thing. So it's like just kind of try to figure out who your audience is and what they can support, and put it out in the world. But definitely go for it, because right now, especially Kickstarter, the Kickstarter community is so huge, and there are so many projects and so many creators going to the platform that it's kind of, not that it ever died down, but it's kind of a resurgence, and it's becoming, like, I think right now it's the second biggest category on Kickstarter is the comics category, and it's on track to become the number one. And there's more money and more projects on Kickstarter this year, and in the crazy year that we've had, than there has been ever. And it's booming, and there's a lot of creativity out there, so why not add yours to it?
It is really nice to see so much success, especially in the weird year we've had.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like I just said, my biggest Kickstarter ever might be in this year, which just kind of blows my mind, especially when back in April or May, it seemed like there was no projects. I mean, there was very few, and you didn't know what was going on, and the whole comic world kind of was starting to fall apart. And now here we are, and I think it's forced both readers and creators to search out for new avenues, and Kickstarter just happens to be one of the most popular ones.
Well, there you go. One of the best things to come out of 2020 then. So
yeah, absolutely. If you're a comic fan, anyway.
Yes. Well, we just got to have more people turn into comic fans. That's the solution.
There you
So
go. Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. But yes, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, Brant.
It has been an absolute pleasure, Nicole.
Thank you. Yeah, it really has been more fun to hear more about the whole Emberverse you have, and really just congrats on all the success you've been having with it.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It's it's near and dear to my heart, so I'm excited. I'm as excited as anybody. And congratulations on your first podcast. This is cool, and I'm excited to see where this goes.
Thank you. I hope we are not the only two people who think that, because it would be really great if people enjoyed this too.
Yes, I'm sure they will.
But thank you again for the kind of inspiration and drive to really get the podcast started. So
hey, I just put a bug in your ear. You're the one that ran with it, so I'm glad to have done that.
Well, thank you again. I am eternally grateful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I guess with that, that kind of covers everything for the Last Ember Hunted #1, which that will be going on Kickstarter for another 12 days. When is the exact date for the?
December 15th is when the campaign ends. I think at 8:00 Central Time, PM, is what I set it for. So hopefully I'm not wrong on that, but yeah, it's that night.
Okay, so anybody who actually is listening to this podcast should definitely go check out the Last Ember Hunted #1.
Yeah, and you can find that at embercomic.com/hunted.
Making it nice and easy for everybody, rather than a long Kickstarter URL.
Right.
All right, well, thank you again, Brant.
Thank you, Nicole.
Thanks for listening to this little experiment of mine. Please let me know what you thought of the episode by mentioning me on your socials. You can find me on Twitter at comic_maven. If you are a creator with a project you're trying to crowdfund and you'd like to be featured on an episode, reach out to me on my website, comicmaven.com.